Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me again this week. And I'm going to be reading the next part in my series on faith and fear. So this one is titled Mystery. So part one, we looked at where I kind of shared my understanding of this kind of dance between faith and fear, or the roles that fear has us play on kind of stages that we're put on. And then I looked at one of the fears behind the stage in part two, which was death, and whether that means we have any value. This third part looks at mystery, and it starts by saying faith sees and holds the paradoxes and mystery of reality, seeing through the facades of certainty that cut us off from hope and love. So let's go through it. Drawn to doubt. Growing up, there was a powerful drive towards knowing. We believed we knew the truth, and I have to say I was proud of knowing it. Such pride forced me to define in increasingly narrow ways who was us, the holders of the truth, and who was the other, those who were misinformed, led astray, or perhaps even evil. Not surprisingly, we were part of a subculture, and I was quickly confronted with the fact that many around me didn't hold my truths. I remember the bewildering moment when I first discovered that a friend fundamentally disagreed with me, and the anxiety this caused, along with the distrust that suddenly fell into my being towards that person, towards the other. A distrust I regrettably held in many of my friendships and relationships throughout childhood. Were they evil? Were they being led astray? Should I interact with them? But I also had beliefs steeped in modernism to help me navigate this tension between needing my truth to be true and wanting to think well of my friends. Maybe if they just reasoned enough or had all the facts, they too would disagree. Perhaps this is what drew me to philosophy, the desire to prove to others, or perhaps myself, that my truth was trustworthy. However, I soon realized that philosophy gave good reasons to doubt and even feel resentful towards my truth. Within the first term, what I thought was a strong faith was exposed as incredibly fragile. Fragile faith always demands a narrow reality. It's always bulwarked with defences that at some point inevitably, unstoppably fall down under scrutiny. And this left me flawed. I remember being hollowed out with fear at the core of my being, of my soul even. What then do I hold? What then do I cast my life upon? Have I been deceived all this time? What can I trust? This was the fear I had avoided since my first encounter with otherness. It is the fear and confusion of uncertainty and the fundamental limitedness of our knowledge. However, this was the most poignant moment in which my faith grew. I needed to doubt. I needed to be stripped of my old stages and scripts of fear that separated me. I felt naked and exposed to the raw power, nothingness, and incomprehensibility of it all, yet I kept finding myself inevitably returning here. Desperate, yet knowing this was somehow the place I had to be. Like the roots of my faith knew I could trust it. In part one, I imagined our lives as being acted upon a stage. This stage gives us the core beliefs that structure our lives and make sense of them. Upon these, the scripts that define our storylines are built. These are often scripts and stories of fear, insignificance, unlovability, powerlessness. And in part two, we saw that many stages cover up the fact that of our death, which confronts us with the fundamental fear, am I worth anything? Prematurely answering this question with the verdict insignificant drives stereotypical masculine and feminine scripts. In approaching the reality of our death, we can start to step into and live within a new reality, a story that faith hears or maybe remembers, one of inherent value, possibility, and belonging. A further fundamental fear behind our stages, covered up by them, is paradox and mystery. The world is a wild and contrary place. Our planet and life is experienced as beautiful, bountiful, boundless, hope-inspiring, deeply consoling, and wonderfully nourishing, as well as indifferent, threateningly fragile, limited, and even callous. People too, we know to be loving, precious, generous, good, as well as grievously hateful, selfish, and destructive. Even within ourselves, we find incredible freedom, imagination, and power, yet we also discover this potential is for both good and evil, life and death, and more, that we are vitally limited, dependent, and powerless. And so we experience within ambivalence, contradictory emotions and longings, sadness and joy, fear and love, jealousy and joy, to approach and to attack, to avoid and to defend. And that is merely our perception of it all. There is a whole world beyond the visible, audible, and touchable range that leaves us in mystery. So if death is the limit of our time, mystery is the threatening limit of our understanding. And all this is terrifying. What then is true? What then is real? What then can I trust? So we crave certainty. We demand it. The world feels safer if we know what we should do, what should happen, and what we should think about it all. So it's like we've made pedestals on our stages of fear, pedestals of authority, of value and truth. We push people up, proclaiming this is a grand position and privilege, whilst often in the end demanding that they tell us the truth we already believe, the truth that is most convenient. This is perhaps a defining feature of patriarchy's view of masculinity. And Bell Hook's book, The Will to Change, explores this more. You have authority as the protector of the truth and have the right to enforce this. So fear leads us to colonialism and powerlessness. We see this script playing out in politics. Uncertainty is deemed as weakness, ineffectiveness, being an inferior and untrustworthy leader. There is little scope for appreciating contradictions and complexity. And so we've seen the demise of real political and moral debate about the good or the true, where contradictions and mystery lurk. We need you to know what to do, and we'll throw you off the pedestal if you don't. This need for certainty forces us into colonialism, the belief that we have the right to do what needs to be done to protect the truth and enforce it when faced with the other. Certainty also forces us to not only make reality knowable, but also split it into good and bad, right and wrong. There is little scope for grey. These two drives entail that we define us, those with the truth, as the good, beautiful, holy, right and true, or educated or rational, and the other as bad, ugly, profane, wrong and false, or uneducated, irrational. And thus we justify colonizing the other by dehumanizing them. We've seen this historically. We have colonized by force and violence, seen in the Crusades and the historical missionary movements, based on traditionalist beliefs that we receive the truth from an ultimate authority. Today, such traditionalist beliefs play out in the multiplicity of ways we shame, the now more morally acceptable way to convert or cast out. And in the next part, I discuss shaming and how it leads to self-betrayal, and how faith reconnects us with our inner knowledge. We can also colonize by rationality or argument, based on modernist beliefs that arose as traditionalist certainty became increasingly dubious. Whilst we may not already know the truth, we can discover it through reason and science. Thus, we, the enlightened Western civilizations of rational men, are the self-appointed heirs and discoverers of truth, and the other are the uneducated and irrational who we need to convince rather than convert. Today, this plays out in the rhetoric of smart politics. Michael Sandel in The Tyranny of Merit charts the rise of the word smart in politics and how it obscures deeper, messier political debate about the common good and privilege, for it presents a reality in which if everyone had the facts and the right education, they'd all agree. Certainty is possible through education and goodwill. Paradox and mystery with regards to good fall away as we focus on what's the smart thing to do. And we can finally colonize upon the pedestal of tolerance and equality, based on the work of feminism and postmodern beliefs. There is no truth, but everyone has a truth that is equal, and we must be tolerant. This fight to combat colonialism, however, also obscures real debate and engagement about powerful questions and forces in our society, avoiding the need to wrestle with the paradoxes and mysteries of the good and the true. I suspect we have socially been left confused and crippled with the undermining values of being nice and not offending. The various ways of colonizing push us into maintaining thin stories. This idea of thin stories comes from narrative therapy. In our political and cultural, as well as family and personal lives, we find these thin stories. Such stories do not allow for much difference. They give a little space for other perspectives and true dialogue. We might have built up our own understanding of what is going on, what everybody else is thinking, who we have to be to fit in with a family or any group. This story about what is going on can be oppressive and hurtful. They don't understand. They won't want me if I don't bring in the bacon. They think I'm stupid. I must look after everyone. They don't really care about me. They won't be able to manage if I'm honest or vulnerable. They think I'm bad because I'm a man. These thin stories limit us, as they often lead us into storylines that do not provide the resources to negotiate the situations they lead us into. We end up down dead ends, lost, powerless, and often feeling alone. And so all of our personal and social strategies for avoiding the fundamental contradictions and mystery of reality deny us and our relationships and our societies the possibilities that different stories, even contradictory ones, offer. They make us susceptible to getting stuck down dark alleys without hope. But faith faces the abyss of not knowing. When we get stuck in our thin stories, dark alleys, we may start to question them. When we are confronted with the colonizing, the shaming, and the othering we've participated in, we may begin to doubt our pedestals of authority. But to doubt forces us to look behind our stages of fear, where we found a place to be and belong, and stare into the terrifying uncertainty behind. But in this moment, doubt and skepticism can reach their fullest potency. For me, drawn irresistibly to this place, I learned to listen into the stillness of what I call real faith, even if that is in a crevice of perturbed confusion. This, I believe, is the silence of a voice that will not be contained by our comprehension, nor will it colonize another. I learned that the darkness, the uncertainty, even the contradictions, could be trusted. That in this stripping away, the emptiness can become the space for something far more trustworthy to emerge. Only in that place did I start to be freed from being bound to the stage of my upbringing and its colonialist scripts, which left me helling others as I ran scared of being wrong and led astray. I believe this place is like a gestation period in the darkness and emptiness of the womb, waiting for life to begin. Sue Monk-Kidd, in When the Heart Waits, compares it to the transformative time of a caterpillar in their chrysalis. Here, the trick is not how to get out, but how to stay there long enough for it to do its work. Faith trusts that the difficult questions that we personally and socially do not want to ask, find impossible to answer, give the spaces for new life to emerge. So what is faith? This new life, this new faith, is wide enough to hold some of the paradoxes and mysteries of reality. We could call it dualistic. We could call it being happy with not knowing. We could call it humility. I just think this is faith, a groundedness that transcends comprehension. This is a faith that can dialogue rather than having to live in monologue, for it's a faith that trusts the otherness of the other, for it sees the wisdom and beauty and good in them. We know that they enlarge our own faith, our own story, by their otherness. And so are for us new possibilities, freedom, and hope. But faith has also always been to do with the heart, with what we give our lives to. And so, stripped of our pedestals, our ways of splitting up reality into good and bad, holy and profane, we can feel compassion again. We can identify with the othered and shamed and touch them with humanness. We can feel the anger that wants to fight for the preciousness of all things. We can lament humanity's capacity and tendency towards sacrilege. And we can celebrate the diversity and multiplicity of life, beauty, and even the sacred, wherever it is found. And so real faith is the prerequisite for love, for ourselves, our world, and our neighbours. Thanks for listening, guys. Do let me know any comments you have.